Alrighty here. So let's go ahead and make a quick little demo project. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get some kind of base mesh starting point. A lot of times when you model with sculpting, um, if you start with a primitive, um, you generally have to kind of build up the form that you're going to start with. So we'd have to actually model something to some degree of accuracy. Or you can start with what's called a base mesh. And a base mesh is just kind of like a jumping off point. And Maya actually has a couple of base meshes included. So if you open up this content browser right here, it will bring up this little menu. And there's actually a couple of things that you can work on. They're very, very simple. There's actually quite a few things. There's like motion capture stuff, some visual effects things in here, quite a few interesting examples. You can see there's like some toon shading examples. But what we're interested in is in the modeling section, sculpting base meshes. And then we want to take a look at uh, the base meshes that we have. So see we have a variety of things to work with. There's even a fighter jet you could start sculpting on. The one that I'm going to start with is this tree stump. So just double click the tree stump and it should be inserted into your scene. All right. So I'm gonna make like a little, maybe like a little hill scene or something like maybe a little park or something. Um, so let's try. First, let's just try blocking out our scene. So we've got our tree stump, and I want you to take note of the geometry on this tree stump. Notice how even it is, how square all of the polygons are, and it's just a very even setup. Notice there are no support loops. That's because we will be creating all of our hardness with sculpting rather than subdivision. So this is what we're going to use to start sculpting on. And then we can make, if we go to our poly modeling, let's make some kind of like hill or something. And we also might want to just shrink this down. This might be kind of enormous. Let's see here. Just gonna shrink this sucker down. It's too big. Alright. So maybe something a little more like that. Just so it's not huge. And then we're gonna grow our plane just a little bit. Just so it's a little bit bigger. And I'm gonna go to my subdivisions and I'm just gonna maybe double this for the time being. Alright. Now we've got a plane to start with and we've got a tree stump. Let's go ahead and let's start working with the shaping of the ground here. So this will be some sort of like ground plane. So let's go to our sculpting and I'm going to choose the grab brush here. And I'm going to make my brush nice and big. And I'm just going to start pulling around, maybe even bigger than this. You know, let's just start creating some kind of like hill. Make it smooth. And you can make whatever you want. If you want to do something a little bit different than what I'm doing, that's fine as long as you're following along with some sculpting. You can pick another base mesh if you want. However, everything that I'm going to be giving you here will be based on this scene. So now one thing that I don't like is It's a little bit difficult in Maya if you're using a pen to navigate like with the middle mouse and the right mouse button. You can do the right mouse button, but you have to change your pen settings if you want to get one of your buttons to be a middle mouse button. I find that very annoying. And I am using a pen right now. Alright, so now we've got like a little hill set up here. So we can switch to tree stump, and let's just pull that up. Maybe let's just put that like over here. Oh, that'll just kind of hang out just for a minute. Maybe we'll go all the way to the edge here just so we can play with some stuff. Be cool to maybe if these roots are like kind of growing down and around the form. Alright, so now we've got a tree stump there, and you can rotate that and move that into whatever position you want. Alright, so that will be our first setup. And then I'm gonna turn off my grid. It's just kind of getting in my way, I think. Alright, now we've got this nice ground plane, and we've got a nice tree stump. So let's add some more stuff. Let's see, maybe let's say maybe there is a couple of rocks. Maybe there's like a big rock next to this thing. And I'm going to smooth on lower details, get my things shaped into how I want them shaped, and then add detail to them. So I'm just holding the B key and dragging with my left mouse in order to change my brush size. So let's create some sort of rocky surface here. Rocks are one of the most fun things to make with sculpting, because they're just whatever shape you want is the shape that it is. And we will be refining this, but right now we're just kind of in the blocking stage. Just kind of getting very simple setup going. Alright, so I think that looks fine for our first rock. Let's, we can just duplicate this. And we'll add another one. And maybe we'll put it back here or something. And we can change its shape and do something entirely different. Maybe this is a flatter rock. So we just don't want it to be the same. Go ahead and start working on, so you can see we can pull our roots around a bit and get them to sit on the surface a little bit better. Maybe we can make our roots even more interesting. We can just change their shape completely. That's the fun thing about sculpting, is you can pretty much just do whatever you want. If you want to change something's shape, it's very easy. This is much more freeform and it's just a much more creative process. So now the tree stump is actually sitting on the ground. It's now attached to the ground. We're just pulling it around. All right. And then maybe let's add something that's traditionally modeled to the scene. Just so that we maybe use some sculpting on like a bench. Let's see. This won't be probably like the prettiest composition, but I want to, have everybody, get the hang of. All right, so these are how you can use sculpting to enhance existing models. All right, so let's see. Another fun thing that you can do if you go to your tool settings on your Move tool, this will only work in 2018. There's a Smart Duplicate, which will let you do the same thing as that, the Smart Extrude. If you don't have 2018, then you can just hit Control D and duplicate that way. So let's see, maybe we need to make this a little smaller here. Just make something. Just kind of create some kind of bench shape here. Well, maybe we're in like a little park or something. All right, and just adjusting things into place. And that's probably really tall for a bench. Let me see. We could probably just lose that top one. There we go. I think that looks more bench-like. You're welcome to make your bench however you want. Let's just kind of move those just a little bit more into position or something. All right, and let's create something to hold the bench. So maybe let's create just a polygon plane for starters. Do a 1 by 1. Oops. And we'll rotate that 90 degrees. And we just want to create something to hold the bench. So we can go to edge mode and we can extrude and rotate. This will be like our side panel. And don't worry too much about, how this all looks. This is mainly just for, for you to get the hang of adding the sculpting tools to your tool belt. All right. Let's see. Let's add. So maybe there'll be a armrest. See, maybe we'll have it go straight and then it will just have it cut down like this. We're just doing some fun freeform modeling. All right, so there's like some sort of, rough end cap there. And we can extrude. Let's see. Actually, if we extrude it, we're going to have to make all our back caps. But what we can do is we could make a new, we just kind of duplicate it. Just move these over. And on this inner one, I'm going to go to mesh display. I'm going to reverse the normals. Then I'll just combine the two. So we go to combine, and then we can just bridge the borders together. And there's a nice extruded shape. All right, so next we need to add some sort of base to this so that it can actually stand. So let's see, what do we want to do for that? All right, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on the bench, but let's try and add some sort of under support for this. Let's see, let's just make like a cut back here. Let's turn on our edge flow. And we're just gonna make a couple cuts. So this gets a little bit rounder there. We'll pull this up just a little bit so it follows the form of the bench a little bit better. Just so that there's some more evenness here. Like I said, what we're really looking for is evenness. Looks like something went a little haywire in the edge flow there. And then what we can do is we will take these two edges and we'll just extrude them out. And we'll just flatten those. And let's just see what a bridge does. Let's bridge these faces. We'll go to the blend. And I'm going to change their beginning and end. That just creates like a fun little something there. All right, we can extrude those now. And we're just doing a little bit of freeform modeling. Let's see, it might be a little bit too tall. Let's try Bringing all this up just a little bit. Alright, well, that is indeed a bench, so that's about all we really need. Alright, let's just, so we can duplicate that, put that kind of in the middle, and then we'll duplicate it again and put it over on the side. Now we've got a nice little bench. If we want to make this more realistic, what we could do is make the wood slats fit between. All right. So now we've got a little bench there. So let's go ahead and group that together. And I'm going to go to Modify and Center Pivot. And let's try and find a nice place to put this. So we'll need to modify our ground a little bit, but that's fine. And then we'll have a little place where we can sit and look out at the sunset next to our little tree stump over here, a little tree stump friend. Go back to the sculpting tools. Let's just make it maybe a little bit more pleasant to sit here so we're not tipping over. It's really fun to make ground with sculpting tools because you can make like whatever lumps and bumps you want. That'd be cool if it was like more of a drop off here. Maybe this will be rockier right here. I think that's my favorite thing about using sculpting tools is just, you know, creating stuff is so free form that if I decide, you know what, I actually do want that to drop off much more sharply, I can just do that, and there's not really that many repercussions as long as I do it early enough. But if I were trying to model this, I would be thinking about, all right, well, what kind of geometry am I using? You know, how is this going to actually technically work? There's a lot more considerations, but with sculpting, I'm just, all right, just moving it around, just pushing and pulling. And the cool thing is that you can use these in tandem. So like, I've made this bench here, but we're actually going to be sculpting on the bench. We're going to add detail to it and make it a little bit cooler looking with some sculpting detail. Alright, I think I need a few more rocks. Just rotate a rock, and maybe we'll make that smaller. The other cool thing about rocks is once you make one, You can duplicate it and rotate it around, and then you have a lot of rocks. All right, so this will be a pretty, pretty bare bones scene. It won't be completely realistic in the sense of, we aren't going to make tons of stuff. Like, we could add mushrooms and we could add all sorts of fun stuff to the scene, but I don't want this to turn into a multi-week endeavor. So now that we have just a couple of objects in our scene, let's go ahead and start refining some of them. So let's actually start with a rock, because that's probably going to be one of the easier shapes to start creating. So if we go to our smooth tool, now that we have, we've got our shape of our rock, so we know what kind of rock we want it to be, but we need more geometry. So just kind of give yourself another subdivision or two to play with. And then let's go up to our flatten tool. And you can just double click on that and get some settings. And I'm going to turn off update plane. So just like we did before. And I want to make sure I'm going to hit F on my keyboard so that I am centered with the rock selected. And that will make sure that when I'm working, I can be working on the rock. And I want to get my brush size quite a bit lower. This will just help me if I'm using the pen. All right, maybe we need a little bit stronger. I can't really see what is happening here. Oops, we don't want to change the size, we want to change the strength. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some flat planes. And we might be able to see this better if we show the geometry, so then we can see a little bit better of what's going on. So I'm just going to create some flat planes. And just create some hardness. Rocks, sculpting rocks is all about, figuring out the planes of the rock so that you can get it a nice look. Once you've got the general planes that you like, we'll kind of go back. We'll turn off that update plane, or turn on the update plane, sorry, so that we can kind of create a little bit more interesting shaping rather than some of these flat planes that become a little bit lumpy. All right, so let's go ahead and let's just turn that on. This will just help us start to get some more form in there. So you can see, I'm starting to create some real shaping in this rock. And this started as a cube, so that's the really cool thing, is this at one point in time was a cube, and now it's something completely different. It's now some sort of crazy rock shape. Let's just go on the bottom here, and let me just flatten out some things on the bottom. Even though we don't see it, it's still nice to get a little something. You kind of want it wrapping up a little bit because it'll create like nice shadowing. Just increase our quality settings there. That look a little bit better. All right, and we might need more geometry. So the thing with sculpting is that your resolutions are going to get pretty high. So you do want to work on the best computer that you can. I know that most people are working on laptops or something, you know, a little bit less powerful. But if you can work on a stronger computer, if you do have access to a desktop or something, it will help. Not that you can't do this on a laptop, just that we will get some higher resolutions of stuff. You can see we're really creating something that looks more, it's probably like a cartoony rock, but yeah, we are creating something rock-like in nature. And we can use other brushes here, so maybe we'll use the scrape brush. Help us get some more shape. We can use maybe a build-up brush, so we'll use the wax brush just to help us figure out what kind of form. So if we need to like add volume anywhere. And one thing that helps too is if you kind of like add volume and then take volume away, so you hold down Control, that will also create some fun effects. Let's just see kind of how our rock is looking. It's looking pretty rocky. Yeah, we've got some interest going on here. We'll add something to the end there. But again, what you're really after is like these flat planes if you're working on a rock. So you kind of build up the flat planes and then you end up with something a little bit more that catches. You can see how like the light catches all of the general planes that I kind of built up. It's kind of like a pig nose there. I don't totally like. You just add like a little bit of randomness. It's just kind of fun to add stuff. And then what we can do is we can go to our stamp tool and let's see if there's any good stamps in the, let's see here. Do we have any that are rocky? So we got some wood chips. This is a stone carving. Maybe this one, this cliff, could do some cool stuff. Let's try that. So again, let's just subdivide one more time. So we'll smooth, just do one subdivision. And this will let us have enough resolution to actually kind of make a difference here. If you don't have enough resolution, oh wow, that's crazy. If you don't have enough resolution, then you just won't really see the effect. It'll just kind of move all of your polygons. So I'm going to turn that down quite a bit. So you can see just by, you know, adding in this texture here, it creates so much more detail on the rock, which I'm actually not super happy with the texture itself. It might be a little bit too much. Maybe if we make him, you know, bigger. Let's see. Oh, that's okay. We can go back and we can like sculpt over. So now that we've kind of like built all this stuff up, we can go back and maybe we'll use our scrape brush and we can just play with the new shapes that have been created by the texture, and we can kind of work those into our form. So you could just leave it, or you can work with it and try and create new shapes out of this new detail. You just kind of like go around and go back over. You can see all this nice detail that we're getting from all that buildup. So now we've got a pretty rocky rock. So that to me looks like a pretty good place to call the rock. I don't think there's a whole lot more we can do to it. Looks pretty rocky to me. Let's go ahead, let's work on the ground a little bit. So what we can do is, let's see, if we smooth it, and we'll smooth it twice there just to give us some more stuff to work with. That should be okay to start with. So I'm going to go to the wax tool. I'm going to work on this little like cliff side a little bit. I'm just going to kind of like cut in just a little bit with the wax tool. So I'm going to hold Control. And just kind of help create this, like, maybe it is actually like a cliff. Very small drop off. Like maybe there used to be a little river or a stream right here, and this is kind of like where it's dropping off. Let's see. I think let's turn our strength up a little bit. Kind of building up. I'm just adding some detail and then smoothing it. Generally works pretty well. You can see just by, making a couple of quick edits here, this is already looking a lot more interesting than it did before. We have a lot more going on. I want to kind of get a sharper bottom here. Just kind of keep pulling this down. Smoothing some bits. And we got much more of a drop off. And let's just add some unevenness to the rest of our ground so it's not so smooth. Ground is very seldom completely round, especially if you're in like a rockier area. There'll be lumps and bumps all over. Just helps create a little bit more interest and character in your scene. All right, let's see. We can try using, add just a little bit more kind of like a hanging effect to this edge here. So I'm just going to take my wax brush and go over the edge. You can see it just creates that like extra hanging effect, so like the dirt's kind of pushing over. We'll smooth the top just a little bit. We can smooth this again. Now, the thing that I don't like about sculpting in Maya is when you sculpt in Maya, there's no way to go back to an earlier subdivision. In other programs like ZBrush, what you can do is you can store high and low subdivision levels, and you can jump back and forth between them at any point. So if I wanted to go back and make an edit earlier, I could do that, but I can't because Maya doesn't let me. So it's kind of an annoying aspect of sculpting in Maya. I'm just using the scrape brush now to just kind of create some kind of form, kind of like harden some of this. Scrape away at some of my flatter, rounder details. The scrape brush just kind of like cuts off the tops of things. So it's like if you were making a clay model and you like scraped off just like the very outermost surface of the clay is what it's doing. There's those little like scraper tools. So it just kind of helps flatten, but it's not as intense as the flatten tool. So it doesn't, what the flatten tool will do is it will actually like move and reorient the geometry. And the scrape tool is just kind of like cutting off the top, if you want to think about it that way. All right, so something like that starting to look pretty nice. Another thing is the like adding some striations with the scrape tool can kind of just give it like a fun look. Kind of like add some extra randomness to your scene, especially if you just kind of go crazy. All right, now let's try and add some actual detail. So I'm going to go to my stamp brush, and in the stamp, I'm going to import a stamp, and I've got some of these things for you guys to download. So you should see all of these up on the website. So we've got a couple of grounds. We can put, let's try this ground 30. And we can you just choose import and then you select it from your source images file or folder. All right, so let's just add some surface detail here. Maybe this is like a bit of a rockier path. Or sorry, maybe it's more like dirt. Maybe this is like more grassy and this is like an actual dirt path down here. Let's just add some texture down here. Just make sure you kind of cover everything. And you can see pretty soon, like if you try and add the dirt texture to the side here, there is technically less geometry there, so it's a little bit harder to add texture, which means we're going to need to subdivide soon. Maybe this will be, maybe it's like a little dirt patch kind of right up at the top. Just add like a little bit of some detail around. So we'll not make it as intense elsewhere, but let's add just a little bit of something. All right, now let's try another stamp. Keeps wanting to jump to my other monitor. Let's try maybe this ground 8. So what does that do for us? I think this will just kind of give us some nice surface variation. Probably work nicely like on these edges here. And you can see this extra detail just like kind of fundamentally changes how the thing even looks. All right. Next, I'm gonna choose the. Actually, I want to see what it does to our landscape, which actually I think it does some nice things. If you just kind of add it a few places, it'll just add some bumps here and there. If we go back to that cliff face stamp that we used for the rock, could try using it on the sides here and just see what interest that creates. And we can even use it down here just to create, like, maybe there's some rocks underneath the surface. Just add some nice bumps here and there. So we can use textures to accentuate. And if you want to create your own textures, you can. If you just go into Photoshop and create a black and white image and save it as a TIFF, you can create your own textures. Alright, so we might be ready to subdivide one more time. So don't get crazy with subdivision, because you will eventually bite yourself in the butt. Just want to give you that word of warning. Like, you can get too high. And you want to also keep in mind what else is in your scene and how many other things you're going to need to subdivide. There is a way around this, but we might not get to that till a little bit later. Let's try this ground 12. I don't think we've tried that yet. I'm just layering. And then we can kind of go back and let's try like maybe the wax brush. Now that we've got all this new detail, we have more stuff to play with. So we can go in and we can add more shape here if we wanted to maybe make these more rocky looking. Brush. And you can see how once you get into like the higher subdivisions, the effect of the brushes becomes much more, I think, visible. Like, you can almost do like footsteps now, but you couldn't have done that before. Which actually, I'm kind of a fan of. Maybe somebody was walking in the mud here. It's kind of a neat story detail. Maybe they had a little dog friend. I'm probably making a horrible gait for a dog. But, somebody was out in the park walking around with their dog. Fun story detail. It's another thing, like, if I were modeling this by hand, I would never have thought to do that, but because I accidentally kind of messed up, I was like, oh, that's kind of a nice thing. So sculpting is a great way to, after you've modeled something, to add, extra fine detail. So I'm totally just making this up, coming up with whatever random shapes I can think of. There's if it looks like there's a method to my madness, there's not really right now. I'm just trying to like create shapes that interest me. So I'm just, adding form, smoothing it, taking form away with control, smoothing it, adding form back in, smoothing it. And it all just kind of works together to create some more interesting forms. If you wanted to make like a really exact footprint, you could make a footprint texture in Photoshop and then use that to imprint, which then you could get a better, like a better shoe shape, or you could do a paw print or something. Changing your brush size will work wonders for some of these bigger areas. The bigger your brush, the more effect the smoothing will have. All right, let's try using the scrape brush again. Let's just kind of like play with eroding some of this detail that I've created. Sculpting is just kind of something you can get like lost in. You can just kind of do it for hours and just sit there, and it's therapeutic. It's fun. Modeling, in my opinion, is more of a technical thing where you have to pay attention to what you're doing, and you have to pay attention to why you're doing things. And sculpting is more like drawing, where if you just like how something looks, then that's how it looks. And it's not that hard to change your mind later. You can erase, you can redo. So I feel like you guys will probably enjoy playing with sculpting tools. If you do like sculpting, I definitely recommend that you check out the ZBrush trial. They've got a 45-day trial. ZBrush is a much better sculpting application than Maya. I would demo it, but I don't feel like everybody. Well, I don't want to force everybody to have to download it, and maybe you already have downloaded it and you've already used your trial. Definitely don't want to make you guys have to pay anything if you've already happened to do that. But if you're interested, check it out. There's tons of tutorials online. They're really great. ZBrush is a super fun program. It's very different than Maya. It's just fun to use. So I've just been using my scrape brush. And I've just been kind of getting rid of some of the crazy detail that I created earlier. And you can see like this dirt path now looks a lot more interesting because it's not just like noise anymore. Now it's noise, with some sort of purpose. Like there are flat planes in the ground and whatnot. The scrape tool is just kind of like eroding some of the noisier details. And now I'm kind of getting like this nice uneven pattern in there. And like on the sides here, I'm getting like straight lines here and there. Feels more like maybe a rock or something. Or like packed dirt. Be cool if there were like tree roots coming down, like maybe these tree roots like came down and were like sticking into the little path down here. Change your brush size. So a lot of these things are very dependent on your brush size as to what effect you're going to get. Smaller brush sizes will tend to, just have a very localized effect, but you want to make sure that you're having an overall effect. So there's a time and place for everything. So, use your small brushes when you, are doing your detailing. But always make sure you kind of back out and use a larger brush to just kind of check out your scene and see what you're doing and make sure that you're happy with the way that your scene is turning out. So I'm just going back. I'm still on the sculpt brush. Just kind of going back and adding some layering to my landscape here. So I'm getting pretty happy with that. So I think we can call our landscape done for at least right now. I'll probably go back and add a little something to it in a little bit, but for right now, I think it's in a decent enough spot to at least move forward. Let's move on to our tree stump. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna save. I don't want to crash and lose all of this. That would be terrible. Let's call this park. All right. I'm gonna hit F. I'm just gonna focus in on the tree stump. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my wax brush, and I'm gonna get a little bit smaller detail here. And let's just start. Actually, since the form is already in a good spot, let's just go ahead and smooth it once so we have a little bit more to work with. I'm going to get my wax brush, and I want to create some like I guess some like vertical indication of bark here. So if you just kind of like if you just drag your brush over it and then hold control and then drag the opposite, it'll kind of create this like flattening effect, which is nice, and it works a little bit differently than like the scrape tool. Bring my intensity down. Looks like I'm a little getting crazy there. Maybe my pen pressure is freaking out. So we can create like something around the roots. Maybe there's like some sort of interesting thing happening at the roots. Some like knots and whatnot. Maybe this root's kind of like going up. pink color on this that came with the default material. It's a little bit disconcerting. It kind of looks like raw meat, which is a little bit kind of bugging me. I'm going to change that. Now that I'm staring at this thing, I'm just going to add the Lambert to it. And that's so much better. If you want to keep yours that color, you're welcome to, but I don't recommend it. Unless you really just like staring at like an awkward flesh colored material. Don't worry if it's lumpy. You know, we'll get it figured out as we're gonna go through here as to what exactly this is gonna look like. We'll be doing some flattening and some scraping. Maybe I want this to be like a little bit more interesting. And it's kind of like cut down into the tree. Maybe it's like a little hollowed out. Be kind of a cool detail. I'm just trying to add some sort of overall interest to our stump. Some sense that it's made of bark. And that it's got some knots in it. And the roots are doing some fun things. And so let's just try making that bigger. Sometimes it's cool too when like you see roots like lifting off the ground. We could also go back onto the ground and kind of make that respond to the roots. Like maybe it's digging under the ground there. Maybe some of the dirt has fallen away. Take a look at our scrape brush. Let's just kind of flatten some of this so that the other neat thing is like right here, you know, I'm creating that harder top edge. Just using the scrape brush. I'm not using support loops. Just using brushes. And there's just so much geometry here that it's actually able to do that. So that's why you can create like harder edges. You just use your geometry and your brushes to create the sharper forms. pretty soon we're going to need to subdivide again, because I'm already noticing that we're having a hard time getting some of these shapes in. It's just like all blobby, kind of no matter what I do. Let's go ahead and subdivide again. Let's go back to our scrape tool. And I'm just further refining this tree stump until it looks, it's got some like cool lines on it. You know, the shape feels fun. Don't worry if it doesn't look like the most realistic thing. It's gonna be like a cartoon scene. You know, there's any number of ways to justify what something looks like, but if you can, try and like have some reference handy, so you can at least create something that looks a little bit like something that exists. And don't forget to smooth. Just hold shift to smooth. I really like the scrape brush. It gives a nice, especially like when you like use it like a scraper. You're just like, all right, scraping out right here, creating little details. Just creates a nice effect. Alright, so that's starting to look like something. Starting to get there. Let's try and see. I've got some bark textures for you. Let's see what those do on this guy. So let's just double click on the stamp brush. Choose import. And let's go to our source images. And let's try, we've got some, let's see, we want to go to the TIFFs. Let's, we got some woods, we got a knot, got some barks. Let's try this bark. Let's see what that does. Just kind of roughs up the shape. So then again, we can go back with our scrape brush on these newly formed details. And we can use these new details to create new shapes with the scrape brush. Look, I would argue that right now it's a little bit noisy. So I want to get rid of some of that noise. But I don't want to get rid of all of the noise. Some of the noise is good, and some of it has created some cool shapes. But we want to be selective. I'm just eroding some of that noise and cutting it down and just getting it to look a little bit less hectic. All right, maybe we'll just subdivide this one more time. That'll really help with the detailing. That way, as we're eroding the detail, we're getting nice, sharp details put back in. All right, let's try another round at this. So let's try the wood. So I think that's just too strong. Let me add let's just try something a little bit less. Yeah, I think that's a lot better. You can really help yourself by just kind of toning down how strong it is. And you would want to kind of follow the natural pattern of the wood, which would be vertical here. So I'm kind of rotating my shape so that, or my texture, so that it is following the natural path. Following the grain. One thing I really don't like about the stamp tool is that it kind of like locks you. If you exceed the bounds of the object, so like if I go down here, if I pull straight down and I start going onto the ground, it stops. But if I go up onto the stump, then it will continue. And I find that very frustrating. You probably will too. All right, and then I'm just gonna, again, erode some of this noise away. We don't need all of it. Maybe we'll get a bigger brush here. All right. So now I'd say we've got a pretty stumpy looking stump. Looks like it's pretty tree barky. If you want, you could go in with the knife tool. Get a smaller brush. If there's any like particular cuts that you want to definitely accentuate, you can do that with the knife tool. It's like maybe we want to really accentuate a particular line in the tree where we want to cut in something. So if we want to cut in Lipscomb or something, you can do that. It's going to take a little bit more time than I want to do, but maybe we could do like a, someone's gone and carved their initials in. You can just add whatever extra details that you want. If we want to like say like, all right, here's like a piece of bark and it's coming down like that. Just use this to really accentuate any detail that you want with the knife tool. It's really great for especially like these crevices. If you want to accentuate a crevice or create like a knot, you can kind of cut under the shape with the knife tool, and that will really add some contrast. I did also have a, in the stamp brush, do have for you a knot brush, which we can use if we want to stick a knot somewhere. Drag the influence up. Maybe too influent, but that just adds some like extra cool detail here and there. Some knots. And I'm just holding M and dragging to change my strength value. Also just helps give it some extra randomness. Kind of calm that down with the scrape brush. So now we've got like this cool old degraded tree stump. And here's where I was talking about, like, you can use the bulge tool. It kind of like inflates things back up. This kind of got a little bit kind of got a little freaky there. Could even use it to like inflate some of these shapes on the tree itself. It'll give it a nice kind of like bubbly feeling, which could be cool for, you can see how it's creating like these overlaps. It's kind of like bringing things together. Creates a nice look. Just kind of, maybe we've got like moss and lichen growing over this. especially where I made those cuts. Just kind of like, you don't want to overuse this, but if you just do it a little bit, you can add some nice detail. Create some cool lines that you wouldn't have otherwise created. Just bring some of these shapes together. I think it just makes a nice look. Accentuates some other shapes. So we got like this cool twisting effect happening down here, which I didn't even consciously make. Just through happenstance, it ended up coming to fruition. You do want to be careful if you see any like black on your sculpt. That means that you've got like a back face showing. So you just want to use the smooth brush very, very softly. And just kind of go back over. I'm going to take the knife tool and I'm just going to cut into this top here to create, maybe it's kind of like eroding away. Just to do something into the inside here. Make the brush smaller. Right, now it's like it's being eaten away. We could use our scrape brush and just kind of soften some of it a little bit. But now you've got like a pretty serious, realistic, tree stump right there. We took it from a weird little meat-colored blob to pretty cool looking, if I do say so myself. So, in the next part, we'll just continue on and finish. Maybe we'll do some work on the bench, create some cool stuff for the bench, and then we'll kind of finish out our scene.